Welcome to the lecture series on object oriented analysis and design. In the last few lectures, we have been looking at what is called a use case driven software development, which positions the entire exercise more or less in a business context, and we can tackle many things at the requirements level. Today, it is a fact of life that there is nothing called frozen requirements. Requirements change, they will keep changing. 30% if they are stable, we have done a great job in requirements. Once we started after requirements, everything was becoming a change request. That methodology has now changed a bit, because we know that this is going to be the case with requirements, and therefore, what we did was we have subtly positioned use case, which is so special about object oriented analysis and design, as something that tells us how to make things business driven to requirements driven, and everything flows. So, this is what was the subject matter of the last few lectures, couple of lectures. Into this, we have tried to integrate what we began with. What was the strength of object oriented? It is not enough to talk only about processes related to software development. We need to talk about organizational processes, we need to talk about support processes. There are so many supporting processes. This was the essence of our work. It is not for the first time that in the profession of engineering, we are trying to bring together a development process, an organizational process, and a support service process. This has been happening all along in engineering. What began as a craft became an engineering discipline. Once it became an engineering discipline, gradually the industrial revolution made it a kind of a factory orientation, assembly line. So many ideas have come soon after the industrial revolution began to impact our lives. So, what we ended up doing was that trying to come up with a terminology that is very standard. People in the business world talk that terminology. We are not likely to say that this is business, this is operational, this is business. The idea of phases has become very predominant only after the software development has taken roots. Otherwise, everything is an integral part of a business. Business is not split into so many subsections or so many phases. It is a part of the business. We start here, we do this. This is what is the way in which we go about. So, as Turing has already predicted, by the close of this century, most terminology will change, and that is exactly what has happened. He has also anticipated that what will be the immediate impact of computerization. We were gloating on some feeble powers that will vanish. We cannot say that doing this small changes here and there will make the entire system quite up on the power. No, it does not happen. So, what is the hierarchy? Everything is still there. So, what we banked upon are a set of terms, a set of terminologies which were universally acceptable, because industrial revolution was a global revolution, and what came to stay is the idea called work breakdown structure. From this very introduction of computerization started creating a shift towards workflow diagrams, and this become very dominant in our use case driven architecture. A typical project management has initiation with a project charter. Very soon we draw a line somewhere, a demarcation line will be drawn somewhere. We want to scope the project. We keep telling, even today it is true, even sky is not the limit. However, depending on the limited resources, depending on the limited time, we can do this much. Not only that, we have to talk about so many other things, saying that this is the scope of this lecture. The scope of the lecture is outlined at the beginning, saying that we talk about work breakdown structure and how it relates to a workflow diagram. So, this scope is nice, we talk about everything, and then we expect that a work breakdown structure which encompasses the cost, the time, and the human resources. The resource allocation is absolutely necessary, and this is the configuration index. Also to consider quality, risk, communication, procurement, integration, all these became nicely captured in project management body of knowledge PMBOK. There is a project management institute, while the people in the field of software development are highly prone, highly accustomed to take this approach, and it is related to a project management body of knowledge. What exactly happens is something which is a matrix like this. This is what is necessary: integration, scope, time, cost, quality. It is not that it is a linear definition, a progressive document which talks about input, which talks about output, which talks about tools and techniques. That is not enough, even though we would think that actual work is here. Once all these are agreed, once it is as per the PMBOK, we begin the work. Work breakdown structure is there, you just go ahead and make the work happen. However, it is not a linear set of ideas: project scope statement, requirements documentation. We are not so good on documentation in the field of software. Work breakdown structure dictionary, we will have our own terminology. You can have your own terminology saying that for our context, for our organization, our WBS talks this language, this is a lingua franca. However, we are very fortunate, we are a good academic, we maintain the standards in terminology, and going ahead with that scope baseline, what is the minimum guarantee that this scope is whatever we have scoped is meeting the customer's requirements. If that minimum guarantee is not there, our scoping is not correct. We should scope in a manner where the customer's requirements are satisfied. Well, without going back to the old world model, how to make it requirements driven, not wake up at some point and realize that, oh my God, we made a departure from what the requirements wanted, or what was the intent when we were talking about, and we are not able to preserve the intent. That was the goal. Meet. Project document updates tools and techniques with decomposition. The work breakdown structure used as a basis for a number of processes, in particular to produce the subsidiary plans of the project management plan. The WBS is a deliverable oriented hierarchy. Deliverable is quite stringent. Thanks to this idea of WBS, even though it was a bit late, software engineering, software development projects also began to fall in line with that standard term called deliverable. Otherwise, we were talking about roadmaps and milestones as our best attempt, and that is more or less prior to understanding the work breakdown structure. It is in the PMP, that is the project management plan. So, PMP also stands for project management professional, who is certified by PMI. If somebody can pass a majority of these PMBOK knowledge areas, it should be enough. The WS is a deliverable oriented hierarchy of decomposed project components that organizes the defines. This is what we know. A typical work breakdown structure is very simply called an exercise in decomposition of engineering disciplines, because it becomes very obvious what to divide and conquer. There is a strong dialogue with materials. The segregation becomes more or less easy once we start systematically looking at the scope, the cost, the time, and the other parameters listed there. So, in the case of work breakdown structure in the regular engineering exercises, we are very likely to make it synonymous with divide and conquer. That is what it means also. We know how to divide the entire work, we know how to divide them into smaller pieces. Now, what happens if the work is abstract and we do not deal with tangible entities that many times, that many numbers, we do not have that material contact? Then what will happen? That is the challenge. We are not able to define work which is abstract. The elements comprising the WBS assist the stakeholders in viewing the end product of the project. The work at the lowest level WBS component is estimated, scheduled, and tracked. This is what is the meaning that we have been giving. The work at the lowest level WS component is estimated, scheduled, and tracked. So, whatever we are doing as power circles at the lowest level will automatically once computerization or even automation happens. So, this is where we have been talking about, but then it came in very late. It was not there until the OAD and the bottom up practices began to happen in a reasonably well orchestrated manner. The structured programming, the top down analysis was driving, but then very quickly we lost the contact at the lower level, and until OOAD happened we were not able to put them together. But by that time, by 1990s, computerization has set in. There was a phenomenal acceptability, much to the surprise of many, because the businesses accepted computerization. COBOL was a runaway success, and nobody thought that there will be so much volumes of business on data oriented, using machines, using computers. So, the story goes on. The fact remains that by 1990 it has got a phenomenal acceptance, and what we were doing was to answer the demand from the users that we want more. We started accepting complexity. We need to make it more complex, we need to do more things. So, that is when we started gaining the acceptability for the bottom up approach. And the dictionary of WS, a WS dictionary is a companion document to the WS that describes each WBS element. For each WBS element, the WBS dictionary includes a statement of work. We can define our own elements, we can have our own definitions, there is nothing wrong. Our work breakdown structure looks like this. There is cross referencing, it is a standard set of terminology, it is a dictionary that tells our term used here means exactly this, nothing more, nothing less. We can have multiple terminologies. A typical example: redecorate the room, prepare materials, buy paint, buy a ladder. It makes sense. You have to prepare materials, you have to prepare room, you have to paint the room and clean up the room. 4 major tasks are becoming obvious. The subtasking will become obvious. So, what did we do? We made what is called the divide and conquer. The problem is a big one. The divide and conquer methodology become obvious. Divide the total work of the project into major groups, then subdivide these groups. That is exactly what we did. Product breakdown structure, focus on product to be delivered and not on the work to do. This is where the difference comes. Outside of the work breakdown structure, we started talking about a product centered approach. That is what we did. The WBS was very good for the structured world. Now, the use case people talk from the exact product, the vending machine first. That is how we began the first lecture. We talk about the vending machine first and build everything from the vending machine. We talk about what we want to end up with first and then build everything as a breakdown exercise. Scope breakdown structure, geographically discrete components, time based phases and stages, multiple time zones, people talk at various times, discrete structural process, system or device components, deliverable elements that can be associated with distinctive types and people, skills or resources. So, this is an idea which we said, scoping is not necessarily indicating that everything will be centralized. Scoping can be decentralized. So, there is a very nice recommended reading which is Max Weidmann. Weidmann's approach was very good, because what was the secret of the success of scoping in other engineering disciplines? A strong sense of materials. Without scoping, we do not talk about a plan, we do not talk about a WBS. But then the idea of scoping becomes abstract. We need to talk about it in a manner where we have to understand that the time based phases and stages will be there. What happens in the morning here is not likely to be caught back immediately. We have tried, we have had many such challenges. Nothing is fully advantageous, nothing is fully disadvantageous. We could complete some work late into the evening and then push it to the US people, the main people who are going to do some exercise, get back, have a good dinner, sleep. By the time we got up in the morning, the result is out, the outcome is out. We can stagger. We will work in this spell of time, they work in the night. So, we know that people are really willing to understand that we can manage a scoping globally distributed. All this happened without any serious requirement of computerization. The entire world was happening through industrial revolution several times on several of these concerns. It is not the first time we are talking about. A scope breakdown structure will simply tell that this is how we want to look at how much paint, how many ladders, 1 ladder, 2 ladder, what brush, what paint room, how many curtains. It becomes obvious when we talk about the scope, we are beginning to see the functionality. Until then we are not seeing the functionality. We are only talking about work, what is it that we need to do. We are also talking about some idea about what we end up with, looking at it from the room side or looking at it from what we should do. Then we are answering that question how, beginning to answer that question how by having the scoping. This is how we should do the scoping. Now, in all these cases we have had a few more breakdown structures, as we keep telling that the idea of breakdown is nicely flowing into very many things. It is not merely to manage the divide and conquer of the work, but also when something goes wrong we should know how to halt, we should know where to halt, maximize safety, so many things are there. Organization breakdown structure, risk breakdown structure, work breakdown structure which we have seen, resource breakdown structure. So, the notion of the breakdown structure is not necessarily only one called work breakdown structure. There will be an organization breakdown structure, there will be a risk breakdown structure, there will be a resource breakdown structure, all in alignment with the work breakdown structure. And while we talked about OBS in a more softer manner, it is typically an organization chart, a hierarchy, an organization chart is there. Once computerization began to happen, once automation began to happen, we talk about flat organizational structures. For what? For managing a responsibility assignment matrix. That is the first time at an organizational level we were talking about a flow. Work flow began to become very attractive. Otherwise, what was happening? Organizational hierarchy is like this, but wherever there is a computerization, wherever there is an automation, somewhere very sublime to this hierarchy chart, there will be a flat organizational structure, which simply means that nobody has a grip on whatever is happening at the organizational level, and the risk will manifest at all levels: technical, external, organizational and managerial. And are we going to simply react to the risk, or are we going to be proactive? So, software engineering keeps on telling that we have to be proactive. Every engineering discipline tells the same. Work breakdown structure, time management, resource breakdown structure, these are the various things that are controlled by responsibility assignment matrix, which need not adhere strictly to the hierarchy. But if you do not have a clear picture about responsibility, we may neither be having a hierarchy nor being into the flat organizational structure to get to the goal. We are neither there nor here. Most of the times it happens in this world. Difficulty of having the best of two worlds is really difficult. You have to choose one most of the times. So, what we need to understand therefore is that the responsibility assignment matrix is not really looking at the hierarchy in that sense of hierarchy. WBS, PERT, critical path method, Gantt charts, everything are nice, the flow begins in that level. The work breakdown structure is a hierarchical description, project overview statement, it has activities, it has tasks, it has milestones. So, this is what I have been talking about. We started talking about roadmaps and milestones. Those were the standardized terms. Software development was no different. We were talking about the same roadmap, milestone, because it is the easiest way to communicate to the customers and the customers' customers who talk the same language. Gradually, over the last 15-20 years, we have migrated towards the idea of workflow. Today, we accept that the organization, when it comes to automation, is also appearing flat. For what? For the workflow. That is what we talk about. Overview, it will be task. Now, for the software development people, we need to understand that it is not merely work defined like we should do this. I can also tell today I had 4 works: 1 attend to my mail, 2nd take care of some homework, 3rd do a lecture, I have 1 more in the evening, that is it, that is all is my day. Now, am I able to task them? That is a question. It was enough in engineering if you identify the work, because the materials procured will dictate what can happen. The moment you start having a dialogue with the material, it will automatically tell this is the work that can happen. And with reasonable training, with a good skill set, we know that how to fit all the things that I have been talking about without really being concerned about the term breakdown, but then we know that it has to be done in easy installments, and we can do it iteratively over a span of time. A reasonable comfort, with reasonable comfort we can manage, we can attain what is our goal set. If 1 brick is done in 1 hour, how many bricks will be done in 8 hours? 8 bricks, because that is the time that costs for 1 person. So, everything was centered around work in that kind of a tangible sense, which we are to what is called a task. Can I task myself, or can we talk about tasks in a manner where it becomes very, very clear, saying that this is exactly what can be done? It is likely to happen very soon, but we are still not so confident. Tasking is still not happening. Decomposition is the process of breaking the project scope and deliverables into smaller, more manageable components. So, this is where we said as from roadmap and milestone to deliverables. These are the first indicators of what is called workflow, and when we started talking about use case and use case driven, requirements driven, it was becoming very, very nice. It blends with what is called a workflow. From work breakdown structure, gradually we move to what is called workflow. Those more manageable components are called work packages, and as I said, once you start talking about use case and workflow, automation becomes obvious, the tasks become obvious, everything becomes obvious, what can be computerized becomes obvious. Work in the context of the WBS means work products or deliverables, not the effort itself, as in staff hours of effort. This is a very good book written by Frederick Brooks Jr., Mythical Man Month. It is not really that serious in terms of work, saying that 1 brick takes 1 hour. In 8-hour working day, how many bricks can 1 person make? 8 bricks. 2 person, 16 bricks. It is not just that, staff hours of effort. That is why we keep on saying that our very idea of work is different. Maybe tasks, yes, when they are very clearly defined, they are instructable, taskable. We tasked ourselves to take care of this particular machine like this. It has bearing on every other thing in this room, but then our task tells only this. And we have another role here, they tell my job is only this, my role is only this. The notions of job, it is not that we did not do all these things, but then the strong material sense has automatically dictated many things, automatically dictated. You please think of going on the road, and then there is a physical sense of a vehicle coming from behind, it automatically tells what you should do. There may be a honk, may not be a honk, but somehow our senses are such that we migrate to safety or avoid the line of the progress of the vehicle. Whereas, if you are asked to imagine something happening, something will drive from behind, what it is I do not know. Then what will you do? What are the options you have? For what? What is that is driving? So, these are difficult questions, because work is not so tangibly visible in our work breakdown structure, then why bother so much about WBS in software development? Makes sense. In a way, what we have been communicating has been the same. Software engineering is different. Please do not compare it with other engineering disciplines. The challenge is obvious, the intellectually stimulating exercise is obvious, and the pace, the phenomenal pace, relatively phenomenal pace with which this field progressed is obvious. Hardly 30 to 40 years, and it has been an integral part of virtually everything that we want to do, and there was no other exercise which created that demand, that quickness in the user's mind saying that I will demand more. Normally the demands happen, all engineering products thrive on that. We have to create a market, make the users ask for more. That is how we tell. Software engineering has made it happen much faster, because everything is so plastic, everything can change. People think that they can change very quickly, nothing bars, there is no boundary wall in the minds of the users, they simply want to use. Decomposition we have seen. Now what we did was, the decomposition need not be only as use cases, it can also be a user story for agile process, a set of user stories, sprint. So the concern here is that our work is definable not in terms of the ideology of work elsewhere. It is a mythical man month, objects are not so tangible, things become obvious at a quite later point in time, or dealing in abstractions we would not know what is work. It used to be a problem. Remember when I came to Chennai, that is 88 it was, we had this difficulty of how to estimate the cost of developing a piece of software. As a part of my work here, I was doing that exercise. We have to create a database driven facility for one of the industries here. So how to estimate the cost? Well, I was lucky, I was working in a non-profit organization, so people were willing to spend time to tell. Normally we do it like this, in a typical business we do it like this. However, the business overheads and everything will catch on. A typical line, let us say one line of COBOL, shall we tell that it will cost 10 rupees, 50 rupees, 100 rupees? How do you charge that? So it is not merely a definition of work which we are talking about, a definition of work that relates very nicely to the business in terms of a well established cost accounting, well established financial accounting, so many things which are necessary to come together for an organization to thrive. We are talking about 150-year organizations, 100-year-old organizations, they thrived on all these practices. So we have not done much in terms of any kind of visible destruction. We were only at disruption, because we want to blend with these existing practices which are so stable. It is a sort of a disruption, which is what we have been indicating most of the times. Slight adjustment, because we are not really looking at a massive scale of decomposition also. We do not know what to decompose, neither do we know what to compose. In a level of abstraction, we have built wonderful ideas, wonderful methods, wonderful paradigms to show a 36% success rate. Not merely stopping there, we are showing the potential to tackle more and more complexity. The work breakdown will now appear, which is very nice. It blends with work breakdown as well as workflow as a goal metric. This is the way we blended both. We are not talking about organizational breakdown structure, we are not talking about the risk breakdown structure, we are not talking about a resource breakdown structure or time management. We are talking about a way in which the work breakdown structure, which is so well established over hundreds of years, let us say, will simply blend with what we want to happen as a workflow. Summary is this: how to make both of them blend? Goal, goal based, goal directed, goal driven, or simply put, goal, question, metric, so that it fits into your quality framework. As long as the quality framework is acceptable, whatever we have been talking about is working. There is nothing more, that is the proof of the pudding. Whether we change it, whether we disrupt it, All these we will discuss in the next lecture. Thank you. We will meet again in the next lecture.